All right, is it working? Am I on? Can you hear me? All right. I don't know because the microphone got all changed over here, and I don't work on this side anymore, so I don't know what's going on. I just come in and push whatever buttons I think will work. Well, we are getting ready for another episode of Spooky South Coast talking about the paranormal. Tonight, our guest is Seth Breedlove. You know him from his Small Town Monsters series of documentaries. We had him on the show in the past to talk about the Minerva Monster. Tonight, we're going to be talking about something that we haven't visited in a long time here on Spooky South Coast, a topic we haven't discussed in years. That would be Mothman and all the weird goings-on in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. So we're going to be talking about all that and more with Seth Breedlove tonight on episode, I really don't know what number it is tonight. 487. Usually I'm pretending to not know. Tonight I really did know. Episode 487 of Spooky South Coast. Hey, I don't even have the music brought up. See if I can keep stretching this for a couple more seconds. I'm looking. So it's episode 487, you said? Okay, well, it's going to be starting right now. Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa, science advisor Matt Moniz, and Stephanie Burke. And I have to go backwards with the microphones tonight, and it's all weird. It's all messed up. Not that anybody listening cares, but... And I also
just you.
I got a hard candy in my mouth.
You do. You're fired. From here on out, you're done.
I have a hard candy. I should spit it out, but it's so good. From the sushi restaurant down the street.
It is.
I've never had a after-dinner pear-flavored candy before.
Listen, you needed it after what you ate.
All right, I swallowed it. Swallowed that sucker whole. I know I had...
You're disgusting.
Oh, my God. My haircut. I look wicked hipster-ish right now.
You do. You do.
I didn't realize that with the... I got the slick back hair and the beard going.
You do.
And the sides are shaved. I didn't realize that I walked out of my barber shop looking like a hipster today.
All you need is the skinny jeans and the flannel.
No, never.
If you do that, I'm not talking to you anymore.
Never. Well, Walter, my barber, if you're watching, I didn't realize that that's the look that I ended up with. But no, this is because I'm trying to brush my hair back, so I have to kind of train it to start going
It doesn't look
again.
bad. It's just not what I'm used to.
Right. Hey, whatever.
Go with the flow.
I'm hip. I'm cool. That never happens. Well, we are here to talk about the paranormal, as we are each and every Saturday night. And the Red Sox schedule, by the way, came out. I have it over in the newsroom.
Oh, good.
So there'll probably be a bunch of Saturday nights coming up where we won't be on WBSM, but Matt Costa, in his infinite geniusness, has figured out the way that we can broadcast over YouTube.
Tell me about it.
So, what? We don't want to tell you about it. It's all technical.
Oh, fine. Okay.
You don't need to know.
Fine.
You going to press buttons?
Yep.
There's buttons over here that have to be pressed. He figured out which ones are the right ones, and
That's
that
all that
allows us to
matters.
keep doing the show. Right. You just sit there and you worry about the chat room and talking and sharing information
We're on
with us.
Facebook Live right now, too.
Okay, all that stuff. Jeez, we're everywhere.
We're everywhere.
And we will be joined in just a bit by our guest for tonight, Seth Breedlove. And as I mentioned in the open, he has been putting out this Small Town Monster series of documentaries. Minerva Monster, that was the first. It hit huge, turned into a whole big thing, and that was just the first in the planned series. And they're working on the Mothman one right now. They're actually working on, and they're in post-production right now. So it hasn't come out yet, so you're going to be getting kind of a sneak peek of what to expect when Seth joins us a little bit later on the show. Now, I've been researching. I'm working on another TV project, and one of the things that we've been looking at are towns where there's multiple haunts in a town and where they all might be interconnected. And right now they're looking for places that have personal, private residences, people who are having problems that want help. That type of haunt is what they're looking for. So if anybody has anything, just send me an email, tim@spookysouthcoast.com. But when you look at towns where there's a bunch of weird stuff that happens in a very small area and it all seems to be interconnected, I think Point Pleasant is one of those places where it stands out as one of the communities where, a lot of weird stuff goes down there and it has to be interconnected. And so we'll get into some of that with Seth tonight. But I knew that we were I was talking with my barber today. My barber is very interested in paranormal stuff,
That's
which
awesome.
is cool. And so I was the only one there, and I'm getting a haircut, and we're just talking about all these different things. And as we're leaving, I started mentioning Indrid Cold, which was always like the one thing about the Mothman story that scares me more than anything is, Stephanie, are you familiar with who Indrid Cold is?
No.
All right, you're not going to like it when we get to it.
Awesome.
You are not going to like this story at all. So I was talking with him about that, and then I was like, oh, I totally forgot that that's the topic that we're discussing tonight on the show. So it was just kind of a little bit of a weird synchronicity. So it's nice to delve into the weird stuff again. We talk a lot on the show in the last couple of years about, the paranormal community and people doing the research and everything. And I always say this, but we got to do it. I want to get back to the weird stuff. I want to get back to the weird stories and the things that you just don't hear anywhere else. That's what I think has made this show so successful for so long. And I think that that's where we can entertain and inform people the best and keep our entertainment level up too, I like hearing about that stuff. Stephanie, not so much. She gets weirded out.
I can't help it,
And you will definitely get weirded out tonight when we get into that.
I can't wait.
And speaking of weird, it doesn't get any weirder than our usual weekly segment. That would be The Week in Weird with our paranormal news correspondent, Melody Knapp, who also makes a fine zombie.
She does. We were zombie twins.
That was, people can see the pictures. We put them up, and we did Facebook Live videos and everything. And,
We did. We had a good time.
And maybe the next time we all get together, we don't have to peel our faces off afterwards.
I may never do it again.
What? You made a great zombie.
It was a lot of work.
You'll have to do it again.
It was a lot of work.
Yeah, and John Brightman, if you're listening, I'm still getting rave reviews from people about the work that you did. So, but why don't we get a little weird?
Let's do it.
Did I hit the button? I did, okay.
Spooky South Coast presents The Week in Weird with paranormal news correspondent Melody Knapp.
And good evening, Melody. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
We are spooktacular, and we were talking earlier that we've had a couple of weeks now without the Week in Weird, but that's all right because you're going to make it really weird for us tonight.
Of course I am. So pretty much to start it off, I was actually sucked into that horrible hole of a clickbait ad. Opening of this museum sparked paranormal activity. Written by Kelly McClure, but it goes on to talk about, all the different haunted artifacts that are in there and how once they opened the museum, all these weird things started happening, like one of the dolls that they have there would move and, be found in different spots, and there's an oil lamp that actually, like, if you touch it, you get ill, like violently ill, and just things like that. Now, what really made me want to talk about this article with everyone is, what do we think about haunted artifacts? Because we always, are dealing with, haunted places and ghosts and apparitions, but what are the odds that an entity can literally attach itself into an object and then cause things to happen thereon after?
Well, I can tell you that there's a fantastic book on the subject called Haunted Objects.
I've heard of it.
Stories of Ghosts on Your Shelf, written by Chris Balzano and Tim Weisberg, that I think everybody should go out and read. But Stephanie,
Perfect plug. Perfect.
Yes.
you have a lot of experience, Stephanie, with haunted items.
I do, actually. I do. I've experienced it quite a few times. A lot of the times when people ask me to come to their house and figure out what's going on and why all of a sudden these crazy things are happening, my first question is usually, what's new? What did you bring in? What antiques?
Yep.
What did you pick it up at a yard sale? And usually almost, I want to say 95% of the time, it's something that just came into the house that's causing it. So haunted objects are a real thing. People don't realize it.
I mean, I've got a bunch of them out in my shed that people have given me and said, hey, I got to get rid of this thing. It's causing me problems. And
You're not right, my friend.
no, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't bring them into the house.
Too close for comfort.
There's one item that I don't think it's in the book because I think we found out about it afterwards. Chris and I actually filmed a TV pilot or a sizzle reel for a show on haunted objects, and a friend of ours had this chair that was just wreaking havoc on his life. And it was, I've never seen an object change somebody as much as it did him when he was around this chair. And he was talking about how he would just sit in the dark for hours and all these bad thoughts would just come into his head and it was affecting his life and everything. And he had it actually locked up in his parents' shop. And he brought us to go check it out. And he was afraid to go near it. And he didn't want us to go near it. And we actually saw when he was around it, his face would change. His mood would change. And he just looked and acted different. And I asked him, I said, do you want us to take the chair with us? And he said, oh, no. I have to be the person to protect
I remember
the rest
that
of the
story.
world from this chair. So
Wow.
I still want to get my hands on it because I think it would look awesome on the stage for an evening of ghost stories and New England legends. But
Absolutely.
we'll carry around a haunted chair with us. We're not afraid.
But no, this museum, I mean, a place that has a collection of all these different powerful objects. I mean, I would want to question, was there not activity before the grand opening? I understand that was the whole point of the clickbait, to get you kind of to go through of it. But it was also the second kind of part of this is, what happens when you gather all of these items into one space? You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I mean, we've seen it happen with the Warrens. We've seen it happen with John Zaffis and now Greg and Dana Newkirk with the Traveling Museum. You know, these energies collect. All right. Well, do you have another story for us?
I certainly do. All right. So my second one is something that I think everyone's going to have a pretty big opinion on, and it was titled "My Problem with EMF Readers." It was a video put out by Bill Highland, which I can kind of go over with you guys. In the video, he goes over, the whole point of what an EMF detector does. But he brings up a very good point about false positives, because we're using this tool to detect, I guess you could say, paranormal activity. But you've got to think about all the outside things that we have no control over that can affect us. Like, it's really good when going to determine if there's like a fear cage, in a room that's causing people to feel uneasy and things like that. But I mean, it's not a tool that I utilize as much as other people do, just because I kind of find it something that can produce the false positives.
Well,
So,
the biggest problem
what are your thoughts on it, guys?
the biggest problem on investigations is cell phones. I mean, everybody's using their cell phones and everybody's putting apps on their cell phones for investigation, and that's causing all these false positives. So you really need to be aware of that when you're utilizing these devices. And it's okay. Listen, we tell everybody put your phone in airplane mode. It's okay if somebody doesn't, but you just have to make sure that when something's going off, that it's not their cell phone that's causing it. I would never tell somebody at an event, listen, you can't have your cell phone active, knowing that your kids are home alone while you're here.
Right.
You got to have a little bit of leeway for that, but at the same time, it can't be, that you're just wandering around like texting all night or playing around on your phone and causing all these false positives. So that's just the number one thing I think people have to be aware of. That, and the fact that just because you get a fluctuation doesn't mean that it's paranormal. It's until it's repeatable and it's happening in different ways.
Well, originally the EMF meter was used to screen out, like what you're saying, the fear cage and other electromagnetic things. Wasn't used as a means of detection. It was used as a means of answering what was around that could be causing it. It's just like a flashlight would be, used to work around in the dark. Now people are using them as a means of communication.
Right. I mean, forgive my ignorance, Moniz. It's been a long time. Were you at the Braintree Town Hall investigation?
No.
Okay. Well, that was a perfect example of a place where EMF was a problem. People were saying that they would walk down in the Braintree Town Hall in Braintree, Massachusetts. People would walk down the stairs into the basement. And they said as soon as they walked down into that staircase, they felt like somebody was there, somebody was watching them, somebody was touching them. And so we went down there. Actually, you weren't there, but I had borrowed your tri-field EMF detector.
Okay.
And so I had that down there. And as soon as I go down the staircase, this thing's spiking like crazy. I mean, it's up around 14. And I'm like, when do you ever see it? And I remember I called you and I said, has this thing ever gone up this high? You said it shouldn't be. And we happened to just walk around and try and figure it out. Well, as soon as we went around the corner into the actual basement, all of the old electrical panels.
Yeah, all the stuff.
It was all original 1940s wiring from when the building was built. Nothing had been replaced.
Nothing shielded.
All the wires exposed. and it was so thick you could feel it, you could sense it, and that's what people were feeling. And I said, listen, if you want that problem to go away, you got to replace all this electrical stuff, which you probably should do anyway, because you're going to have a fire or something with the way that it goes. So yeah, I mean, it's certainly it's a tool to have in the toolbox. Absolutely. All right. Do you have one more story for us?
All right, guys. Yeah, last not least, I wanted to kind of discuss the Week in Weird / I also read an article written on the Week in Weird article about the Anderson Hotel in Kentucky. So originally written by Dana Matthews, rewritten in the Inquisitor by Bill Turner, just to give proper news. But for those who don't know, the Anderson Hotel was actually recently closed to paranormal investigations after Week in Weird actually went and investigated. And there are claims of and video of an investigator being bitten, like actual teeth marks on them, in live fashion. So I guess for this one, it's what are our views on places closing? I mean, like, we're there to investigate, and I understand the danger, and that's something that can really shock people. But if someone's willing to put themselves in that situation, like, where do we draw the line?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is whoever owns it makes the decisions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can make all the promises you want, sign all the waivers you want, buy all the extra insurance you want. If that person isn't comfortable with people coming in, they're not going to be comfortable with them coming in. I mean, a perfect example that you might not be aware of, Melody, and some of the listeners might not be aware of, there was a location in Rhode Island called the Ladd School, where people were constantly breaking in. It was an old abandoned school, and people were constantly breaking in there and investigating it. It's since been torn down, I believe.
Yes.
And but this was a huge problem. Well, some kids went in there one night. They broke in, and one of the kids happened to spill a container all over his crotch of acid.
Ooh.
Awesome.
And basically the acid ate away at his junk. And
oh my goodness.
So he sued Rhode Island. He sued the state of Rhode Island because it was a state school and state property. He sued the state. And I want to say the number was $20 million. That's what's sticking out in my head for some reason. He sued the state, and he won.
Oh my goodness.
So I could be wrong on the fact. He might not have actually, it might have been a settlement deal or something or other. But the fact is, it was determined that they could be held responsible because they let this stuff lay out, even though they broke in to get there. So that's a lot of the problems that a lot of people have. And I run into this trying to find locations for TV shows. People are like, we would have no problem if it was just you guys coming in, but then you're going to put it on television, and then everybody wants to come in. And
absolutely, yeah.
You can't control, a location all the time. Stephanie, you've been following this whole thing with me since the last Fort Tabor event, where they've been having problems with people trying to sneak in.
They've had problems for a long time. They've had problems at our events. When Ghost Hunters went, they actually had to have 3 people arrested because they absolutely refused to leave Batter Milliken, even though they knew they were trespassing. They didn't care. The cops came in. They still put up a fight.
Now it's on television. Now It's been on Ghost Hunters, and it just makes the situation worse. So, I mean, the bottom line is whoever owns it makes the decisions. And I've said this in the past. Just because you own a place that's haunted, you don't owe it to anybody to let people come in and investigate. That's just the reality of it. I know people that are out there in the field saying, hey, I give up my weekends all the time and spend my own money to do this, and I'm doing this for altruistic purposes, and somebody should see that and let me in and do it. But the bottom line is they own it. They don't have to do anything. I'm sure that there's doctors out there that would want to get into places where people are sick, but it doesn't mean that you have to let them in just because they're a doctor. And the same thing for paranormal researchers. Just my 2 cents. All right. Well, thank you very much, Melody, for the news. And should we let people know about? Should we let people know about the new news idea that we have before? Let's plug this a little bit. It was Matt Costa and I talking last week. Matt came up with this idea. We want to make it so that, listen, the Week in Weird, we've been doing it for a long time, where either one of us would read the story, and now we have Melody tell us the story, and then we comment on it. And listen, we're not nearly as funny as and informative and inquisitive as some of our listeners are. So what we're going to do is, we post these stories all week long on Facebook, on Twitter, Matt and Chris do a great job of sharing all these stories throughout the week. So what we want you to do is we want you to follow us on social media, read the stories, and give us your opinions and your thoughts. And so starting next week with the Week in Weird, when Melody reads the stories, they'll be the stories that were put out there on social media, and then instead of us commenting on it, she's going to read some of the best comments that listeners had about it. So that way you don't have to listen to me make a dumb penis joke. You can make a dumb penis joke yourself, and then Melody will read it on the air. And then you make Melody say penis on the radio, which will work out great for everybody, except for Melody.
Oh my goodness.
She's speechless.
You know what? I'm on board. I'm excited.
All right. Well, but that's usually where my mind goes for the joke, so I'm sure the listeners will be the same way. But let's do so. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter @SpookySC, and you'll be able to see those stories and comment on them. Share your thoughts, share your questions. It doesn't always have to be something smart-ass, and we will incorporate that into the Week in Weird. Sound good to you, Melody?
Sounds good to me. I hope it sounds good to everyone else, too.
All right. Well, you have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
You too. Bye, guys.
All right. That is
Bye.
Melody Knapp, our paranormal news correspondent. And, sometimes with these stories, too, like, I'm starting to think that the regular news media is starting to be a little bit more paranormally savvy. You know what I mean?
You mean like that UFO video around the ISS that made the rounds?
Stop that talk right now.
Well, my barber was talking about that. So there's footage of these orbs flying by. I haven't seen it. I just know what he was telling me about it. It's these, these brightly colored
Roughly
lights.
six or so.
It's like one, and then a group of four, and then another one trailing behind.
Yeah.
So and that's the thing about the way things are now. Like I was telling him, in the 60s and the 70s, NASA scrubbed everything before it got out to the news. Now it's a matter of there's direct feeds and direct video all the time that people can watch. So when you're sitting at home and you're like, hey, let me go check out that International Space Station live feed, next thing you know, there's stuff happening.
We can move on from aliens. I'm okay with that.
Well, we do have a call on the line, so I'm going to take this call, and we'll see if Matt can get Seth on the line while we're talking to this person, if you don't mind, Matt. I tell you, man, we're going to get you an intern at some point, so you can just point to the kid that's in the booth over there, and then they'll get the guest on the phone. But until that point, we appreciate you doing that for us. Good evening. You're on Spooky South Coast.
Oh. Tim, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, thank you.
Just want to say I love the show. Love it.
Thank you very much.
This is Gazelle.
What's happening?
Just sitting at home on the couch. I'm petting my cat, listening to your show.
I love it.
You don't have a gig tonight?
I don't, man. I'm tired. I actually fell and slipped on black ice last night, so my whole left leg is out of commission.
Oh no!
So I can't really do much.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Well.
So I want to know if we could go back to talk about the acid crotch again.
Yes.
What exactly happened? I missed the first part of the story.
Well, somebody broke into the lad school in Rhode Island, and for the purposes of ghost hunting. And when they broke in, I guess they went through a window or something, and he knocked over a can of acid, and spilled it on his crotch.
So that's his fault, and he's breaking and entering.
Right, but apparently the problem is because there's the liability factor. If you have your car parked in your driveway, and your car is locked, and somebody comes and breaks into your car, and hot wires your car, and drives it down the street and runs somebody over, you can be held responsible for that.
It just went from 0 to 100 real quick there.
There's flying
gummy bears.
Bears all over the studio. So that's the problem, is that there's always that liability factor. So that's why a lot of these places now lock themselves down tight, and like Lakeville Hospital has the. All right, so I'm looking at the story here. The state was found not liable. So I was a little bit off in my information. I want to say that he was 17 years old.
Young and dumb.
All right, he suffered extensive burns on his legs after they grabbed several unmarked bottles of hazardous materials that turned out to be sulfuric acid. So they broke in, they were messing around with this stuff. He spilled it all over himself and tried to sue them. But thankfully
you can't have kids anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't say in the story exactly where it got him, but I heard it was all over his crotch.
That is horrendous.
So I hear you eating octopus in the studio.
Well, yes, we were eating some octopus. Yes.
Was it live or was it calamari?
No, it was octopus salad from the place down the street. We wanted to do that thing where you pour soy on it and it starts to move.
And did it?
It did not. I think it was cooked.
It was so gross.
So that's a video that we're going to make this week, okay? We're going to go out, we're going to find a raw squid.
Come on.
And we're going to pour soy sauce on it and watch it come to life.
We'll go down to Kyla's Catch.
Absolutely. We will do this.
Well, hey, listen, man, I love you. Love the show. Stephanie, you're beautiful as always.
Thank
and
you.
You guys have a great weekend.
You as well. We love you too.
Thank you for calling.
All right, that's the one and the only Gazelle. We got to get him on an investigation sometime.
We've been talking about it forever. The time that he came in here, what was that, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
3 years ago now, and said that he wanted to?
We got to get him on an investigation.
I was supposed to tell you that you're supposed to make him a grilled cheese. I just didn't have a chance to.
Supposed to make him a grilled cheese.
That's what he said. Tell Tim to make me a grilled cheese.
Okay. I think he wants to steak him instead. He had a post this week on Fun 107's website. What was your favorite school lunch? So before we get into the conversation with Seth Breedlove, I'm just going to go around the table
we have
one
to
time.
talk about food.
What was your favorite school lunch?
I think chicken patty.
Okay.
Deacon School, the hamburger soup.
Okay. Matt, did you bring lunch or did you buy lunch?
I was a brown bagger.
That's what I thought.
But except on Turkey Chunky Day.
See, I was disappointed that
Really?
Gazelle did not put the turkey chunkies on his list.
You know what? It might have been pizza sticks too.
We used to love the turkey chunkies of where you would
I
just.
don't even know what that is.
It's like chopped up pieces of turkey on top of mashed potatoes with gravy.
That sounds disgusting.
Yeah,
awesome.
But when I was a senior, it was 2 chicken patties, double fries. You can't get extra fries with a chicken patty. But
I'm gonna have a lot of shout outs tonight too. I'm just throwing it out there now because we're live. So
that's the idea. We want to do that. We want to let people know.
We have a lot of people watching too.
All right. Well, let's get in. Do you want to do a couple shout outs right now?
We can do shout outs now too.
We have right now.
Jordan Adkins. He's listening from where we are. Sorry, I'm losing it. There's a bunch of people that just came on. Listening from Tennessee, we have Lauren Pexoto and probably Chris too, and they're listening from Westport, Mass.
Nice. Well, you can watch along. Stephanie has it going on Facebook Live. Matt actually has a connection that you can use, but I don't know if it'll work with iPhone.
I have no idea.
You can actually hear the guests. So we're you're doing the best that you can to make it work that way.
I am.
But you can always download the Spooky South Coast app for your iPhone, for your Android phone. It's free, and you can watch and listen and chat all right there on the app. So it's a great way to get involved with everything that we're doing and everything that we're talking about tonight, because we are going to get now into the discussion with our guest tonight, Seth Breedlove. He has the Small Town Monsters series of films, and we're very excited to have him back on the show. Seth, good evening. Thank you for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always great having you on because, whenever we talk about this stuff, we're going to get like 14, 15 emails by the end of the night of people that want to share their own story. So for some reason, I think it's just you have a trustworthy voice. People want to share stories with you.
Either that or usually, you said we get 14 or 15 emails, and I was expecting it to be like people begging us to never have you on the show
No,
again.
Not at all. Well, the last time we had you on was to talk about the first film in the series, Minerva Monsters, and that has just become a huge thing. It's become like a pop culture thing now that goes beyond just people in the paranormal. This is something that people are buzzing about.
Yeah, it definitely took on a life of its own. I think here in Northeast Ohio especially, it almost became like a viral kind of thing over the summer. Like you can get a read on, how the awareness for your project is simply based on like how many people on Twitter are talking about it that you don't know. So if you're searching for like Minerva Monster on Twitter and a bunch of people were talking about it, that kind of indicated that, the movie was definitely kind of blowing up on us. But it definitely took on a life of its own, and it led to the creation of The Beast of Whitehall, which became our biggest movie, and then Boggy Creek Monster that we created last year. So we're kind of rolling one right into the next right now.
And when you have all these projects that are coming together and starting to put an emphasis and a focus on these monsters, it's good because you're giving a spotlight not just to the creatures and to their stories, but to the people and to the towns that have had to endure them. So I know that, with the Minerva Monster, that community embraced you, but are you seeing the same thing with these other communities as well, where, it becomes something that becomes a point of pride for them?
Yeah, I think to greater or lesser extents, Minerva is always going to be a unique one for us, I think, because it was like, I got to say this without sounding like an egomaniac, but the case had been forgotten. The Minerva Monster case had been forgotten. So we were the ones to kind of reintroduce it to the town. I mean, a lot of young kids that we talked to in Minerva had never even heard of the Minerva Monster case. So we were kind of responsible for bringing that back, in a big way to the town, and we created the Minerva Monster Day event the first year when the movie came out, which acted as basically a premiere for the movie, and then we did a Minerva Monster Day 2016 last fall that ended up having over 1,000 people come out, and we showed different movies, like, cryptid kind of movies similar to what we do. And it went just as well. So, I mean, it was a unique case. I don't think we'll ever experience that exact same thing again. We've definitely, we did a screening in Whitehall for the Beast of Whitehall movie, and that went well beyond what we expected it to do. We packed out the Armory and showed the movie to over 500 people.
Wow.
And then with Boggy Creek Monster, we showed it to around 400. But, those two towns with Whitehall and Boggy Creek, those towns were well aware of their, local monster legends, so that it wasn't something where we felt like we had necessarily a voice in introducing people to those stories. But I mean, that doesn't take away from the awesomeness of what we got to be a part of there. But there's something very unique about what happened with Minerva that I don't think, we're working on a Mothman movie now. I mean, Point Pleasant can't escape the Mothman.
Right.
So we're definitely not introducing Point Pleasant to their local monster.
And that's, obviously we'll talk in great deal tonight about Mothman and about Point Pleasant, but what has been the reaction been from that community? Because I know that they embrace it as a subculture within the town. They use it, they have the festival, they use it as a way to draw in some tourism and draw in some attention. But at the same time, when you're showing up with cameras saying we're going to be making a film about Mothman, they must be rolling their eyes to some degree and saying, oh, good, another one.
Yeah. Have you been there?
I have never been, no.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty unique. It's similar to Falk with the Boggy Creek Monster, but they have this museum entirely devoted to the Mothman, put together by Jeff Walmsley. And obviously the festival, the Mothman Festival, has taken on a life of its own, where you're talking, last year there were 12,000 people in downtown Point Pleasant. You couldn't walk across the street. There were so many people. And so, yeah, it's definitely a major part of their tourism. I would say, I got to think of how to word this without. I would say that it might not be, with some people in the town, it might not be as accepted as you would think, because of the positives of the tourism. You would expect it to be something that kind of the town as a whole has embraced. We've run into at least a couple incidents where people were like, we don't want you shooting here. We don't want you talking about Mothman. A lot of that is totally understandable, because when you're talking about the Silver Bridge collapse, you're talking about the lives of 46 people that were lost, and a lot of those people were connected to people in the town. So some of those people see the Mothman overshadowing the importance of lost loved ones, I think, in a way. And it kind of, I totally understand that. We try to be really respectful when we're shooting down there, of like, not running into people's faces with cameras and screaming, but what do you think about the Mothman attacking the bridge, or some crazy thing like that. But I think as when you're talking about certain people in the town that are in charge of the tourism and that kind of thing, I definitely think the local government understands how important it is to their community and how beneficial it's been, especially when you're talking about 12,000 people coming into the downtown area and spending money and tax money. And I mean, they're a case study in how crypto tourism can help a small community.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that I've always found interesting about that area, at least in the research that I've done, and we've had Jeff Walmsley on the show before, and we've covered this from some different angles from time to time, but the fact that there are people who are staunch non-believers in everything that happened, but yet are still willing to have their hands in the pie when it comes to being able to make something off of it. And I find that fascinating because like they don't hold back about that at all. Up here, if you go to Salem, there's probably people who run witch shops and things like that are like, listen, I don't believe any of that. It's just a kitschy little thing that I know I could make some money off of. But in Point Pleasant, you have no problem with shopkeepers telling you, I don't believe in any of this stuff, but I'll carry Mothman merchandise if it means somebody's going to come in.
Yeah, I think, well, it depends on how you approach it, too, because I'm a little on the skeptical side. And I think from what I've seen as far as some of the business owners who are on the positive end of things down there, it's more like they're embracing that part of their history. Like I always say, like these stories are important whether you believe the creatures actually exist or not, because it's a part of that town's culture, like it informed everything in that community, and you cannot go to Point Pleasant and not see those stories imprint on Point Pleasant and its people, especially. I mean, everyone's got a story down there about someone they know seeing either a UFO or a Men in Black or a Mothman, and so I think a lot of people, if they know what's good for their town, are willing to embrace it. Especially people like Denny, who runs the tourism board down there. That guy's awesome. And Jeff has been, honestly, without Jeff, there wouldn't even be a movie. And especially, there might have been a movie, but it would not have been the same movie that it's going to be after the influence and the information and some of the artifacts that Jeff has passed on to me to use in the movie, including some amazing footage that has never been seen before of the bridge immediately after the bridge collapsed. Because our movie does take a very, it's a ground level look at everything that happened in that 13-month span of time between 66 and 67. So anyway, I think the people like those guys that have an active hand in helping steer the town in the direction of embracing this are definitely aware of the positives of it. And honestly, Jeff Walmsley and Denny and Carolyn, when she was alive, they weren't doing this out of some like weird, like money grab situation. It's not a money grab. It's really trying to help a small town that is hurting, like every small town.
So, before I guess we really get too in-depth into a lot of the different stories around it, let's kind of just give everybody an overview of Mothman and what happened in Point Pleasant.
Yeah, in 1966, in November of 1966, two couples were driving around an abandoned former munitions factory known as the TNT area now, but it was a TNT factory area, and they were driving around to basically catch kids that were parking, to neck or whatever kids did back in 1966.
They just held hands, Seth. They just held hands.
Yeah.
It was a much more innocent time.
Right. Parking and
Sure.
holding hands. And
listening to the radio.
Air kiss, whatever they did. So they were driving around back then. I've seen American Graffiti. I'm pretty sure I know what was going on down there. They were driving around trying to catch kids doing this, and they saw a man-sized creature standing on the side of the road, and they freaked out, and this creature proceeded to chase their car into town. They go into town, they report this sighting of this creature to the local police, and the story hits the news wire as it does, and the next day they hold a press conference, and these four kids get up and talk about the creature they saw, never saying the name Mothman. That is something worth noting, because no one that actually saw the creature in the first few days ever called it Mothman. That was something that was dubbed by the local media. So from there, it basically started to snowball, and you had more and more people starting to report sightings of a creature. Now, what we're going to kind of investigate in our movie is not just that initial sighting, but some of the sightings that took place before it, and then all the sightings that kind of took place over the course of 1966 and 67. But in addition to those early sightings, there were also sightings of UFOs up and down Route 35, up and down the Ohio River. There's a really famous case, the Woodrow Derenberger case, where he met a humanoid alien in the middle of a road outside of Parkersburg, West Virginia. And that case has been kind of all frequently connected to the Mothman case, even though Parkersburg isn't extremely close to, Point Pleasant. And that's the Indrid Cold creature who played a large role in the Mothman Prophecies movie. But I mentioned Mothman Prophecies. That's a huge part of the story, is the fact that John Keel wrote this book in the early 70s or late 60s, can't remember, about all the Mothman sightings, and mostly documented the Mothman sightings, the UFOs, and the Men in Black, and these strange premonitions he was being handed off by a creature who would call him and basically, pass on these prophecies to him.
Well, and that's kind of what people have zeroed in on, is the Keel book and the movie, and they've kind of zeroed in on that as being the whole story, but it's not. I mean, even Keel said not everything in the story was 100% on the level.
Right. I mean, so it's a really unique case for us because there's so many different players. You've got Gray Barker, and you've got Keel, and you've got Mary Hyre. And I mean, Keel himself said there were hundreds of sightings of the Mothman. He picked the cream of the crop. And you're not it's also kind of a cool case for us because it's not just one creature, at the heart of this. There's the Mothman sightings, but there's also these UFO sightings and the Men in Black stuff that was going on, and some of the psychological things that seem to be at play here. I mean, the effects of sightings really interest me. Like we've spoken to, or not spoken directly to, but we did talk to one man who said it was the devil. We've heard from Marcella Bennett that it was Satan, and we know that Linda Scarberry, before she died, said she'd been haunted by it her whole life and wished, she'd never seen the thing to begin with. But she talked about poltergeist activity in her house and all kinds of weird stuff after the sightings of the Mothman. So it's not just one phenomenon at play here. There's a whole bunch of different stuff going on, and that's something we're gonna play with in the film.
And that's what I love the most about the Mothman story, and something that I know that drives Lauren Coleman crazy, because it brings in all these other aspects, and it can't just be, this physical flesh and blood creature that people saw. It's all this other weird stuff that's associated with it, which to me just proves that, these type of phenomena are always kind of connected in some way. But you had mentioned something interesting, that there was sightings previous to the ones that we know about. So I know, like Linda Scarberry and the group that she was with in the car, they saw it a couple of days after some grave diggers had reported something similar. Was there something even before that?
Oh yeah. We have sightings going all the way back to the World War I era.
Oh wow.
And I got to give credit. That's credit on that to Mark Hall and Lauren Coleman, actually, because they've written about a book that was actually around. It was one of those university books, and now that I'm talking about it, I cannot remember the name of the book, but it basically talked about folklore in the Ohio Valley. And one of the stories was about giant birds seen around Point Pleasant preceding a disaster or a tragedy. And this was back around the World War I era. So that's, if you want to draw in that, obviously that's a really unique. I don't know that you would make that correlation if it wasn't for the fact that it's literally talking about Point Pleasant and people seeing birds before tragedy.
Well, and also, the fact that it's a harbinger, because that's, the big thing with Mothman is that that's what it came to be known as. So it's not like just walking into the woods and encountering, some of these other cryptid creatures that you might see out there. This when you have a sighting of Mothman, it means something. It means something bad's coming.
Sure. I mean, it just depends too, though, because this is why I love the case so much. I spoke with one. There were two firemen that claimed to have seen. They're frequently referred to as Mothman witnesses, but they didn't see Mothman. I spoke to one of them, and I cannot remember which one now. It was either Paul Yoder or Benjamin Enoch, but they were volunteer firemen, and they were in the TNT factory area either the day or 2 days after the Scarberry sighting, and they claimed that they encountered a massive creature. And when I spoke to him on the phone, he flat out told me it was just a big owl. Like he told me that one of the things that happened with that case is that the local media just started blowing up any story they could. So they heard about the Enoch's Yoder story through someone else, and then they interviewed them about it. And before those guys knew it, they were being written about as having had a sighting of the Mothman. And when you talk about, there were also these pilots at the Gallipolis airport across the river from Point Pleasant who claimed to have seen a massive bird that they originally thought was an airplane. They thought it was an airplane coming in for a landing. They said it had at least a 4 foot long neck and this massive beak. And the way they talked about it, it sounded more like a pterodactyl. So, that's one of the really fascinating things to me is how many different descriptions of the Mothman there are. Because then you obviously also have the man-like bird that you typically connect with the Scarberry mallet sighting. Although that, when you're talking about a man-like bird, they also said it had no head and its eyes were kind of in the center of its chest, which doesn't sound like any men I know. But
right.
It's really unique. It's a really unique case in that way.
And just for those who aren't familiar with the story, where we've been talking about the Silver Bridge as well, and the connection is that it was what 13 months to the day, after the Scarberry mallet sighting that this bridge collapsed, and that led to people thinking that Mothman was the harbinger of that happening, that he was appearing to be a warning of that. But I mean, you have 13 months between this initial kind of sighting and that actually happening. What was going on in the in between?
That's when we're talking to the people we're interviewing for our movie, the thing we're hearing pretty often from witnesses and from, we spoke with a reporter last week named Dave Payton, who was working in the newsroom at the Herald Dispatch in Charleston at the time, and he took a lot of phone calls about UFO sightings. And what they're all kind of saying is it seemed like there was a pattern of escalation. Like everything was kind of spiraling towards something. It's just that no one knew what it was going to be. So you did have whatever the events were, it just felt like things were getting weirder and weirder. So you've got the Mothman sightings, which are pretty weird to begin with. And before those, you'd had UFO sightings, but the two start to coincide, and you've got people seeing, more and more UFO sightings starting to come in while the Mothman sightings are coming in. And then you start having things like the Men in Black sightings, and the Men in Black sightings are bizarre. And when I say sightings, interactions would probably be a better term for it. And obviously, guys like Nick Redfern have written extensively about Men in Black, and I'm a total novice when it comes to talking about the Men in Black stuff. All I know is what I'm hearing, when I go to Point Pleasant and I speak to witnesses or reporters or whoever. But I do know Connie Carpenter, who was connected to the Mothman case because she had seen the Mothman in broad daylight just a few days after the initial Scarberry mallet sightings. She was outside of her home, I believe, and a Mothman, a Men in Black, an MIB pulled up and actually attempted to kind of grab her and pull her into his car. So the sightings or interactions with the Men in Black were kind of running the gamut from terrifying to just flat out bizarre. So all this is going on over the course of 66 and 67. And again, John Keel said of the few cases he's documented that there were hundreds. He just ran the cream of the crop. Now, having said that, I have no way to back that up because of the fact that it does not seem that there are Mothman files that Keel would have kept or did keep, which is not necessarily in keeping with his, he was pretty anal about cataloging all of his, his stuff, not necessarily cataloging it, but keeping it. And I spoke with his archivist through email, and he said there are very few Mothman files or cases on file in Keel's collection. So I don't know why that is, because Keel does say that he interviewed, quite a few people about Mothman, and even leaving aside the ones that he supposedly didn't, write about. He should have files somewhere of the Carpenter sightings and the Scarberry Mallet and all that stuff. And it doesn't seem like there's a lot of information in Keel's collection on that. So I'm curious to know where that stuff would have gone.
Well, of course, we can speculate on that. But we are just about out of time for this hour. When we come back in the next hour, I want to get more into some of these Men in Black sightings because they are different than a lot of some of these other stories that we hear about these visitations that people get. And I do want to talk a little bit more about Indrid Cold just because I want to give Stephanie nightmares tonight.
You're so kind to me, really.
Hey, I always have your best interest at heart.
You
so
do.
We'll get into all that coming up, and we'll get into more of what Mothman could be. And I want to be fair and present the other side. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the Joe Nichols of the world and the kind of stuff that they've said about this. I know. Even I roll my eyes when I say Joe Nichol, like Joe Nichol rolls his eyes when somebody says my name, I'm sure. So it's the same reaction either way. So we'll get into all that coming up in the next hour with our guest Seth Breedlove, and you can check out the website during the break if you'd like to, smalltownmonsters.com. You can find out about this project as well as all their other films. You can get them right there on there as well, and absolutely 100% recommend following them on Twitter as well. You can follow us at SpookySC, and you'll see we've been tweeting out links to both Seth and the Small Town Monsters site and Twitter account and all that too. So we'll get into all that discussion coming up, and we'll also take your calls at 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. You can also join us in the chat room on the Spooky South Coast app and on our YouTube page and on SpookySouthCoast.com as well. So many ways to get involved with the show, but we'd love to hear your voice. We'd love to hear your calls and your questions as well. So the website has the phone numbers right there on it, and we'll talk to you in just a few.